We are back on the World of Warcraft forums for another reaction. Remember, if you want to support me on Patreon, then check out the link in the description. Get access to erosiumtv.com, my professional guides website, with over 150 guides for you to check out at your leisure if you support me on Patreon. And if you want to get awesome dragon t-shirts, then check the link in the description. But without further ado, let's get into the video. This one is quite a funny one. I've got to say, petition to remove affixes from Mythic Plus in World of Warcraft. Oh dear. Oh dear. Where do I start? Where do I start with the petition to remove affixes from Mythic Plus? So if you have been living under a rock and you are a brand new player in World of Warcraft, then you probably don't even know what affixes are. But if you do Mythic Plus, then you will. Affixes are effectively ways that make Mythic Plus a bit more difficult and a bit different week to week as we progress through the Mythic Plus. There are a lot of different types of affixes in World of Warcraft, but it basically just changes it week to week. So sometimes it's harder to push a high level of Mythic Plus, and sometimes it's easier depending on the affix and what type of affix it is. But to read this is from a fella called Art Zazar, and he's a 70 undead rogue. And I love his screenshot, really cool profile picture there, mate. I just can't believe Blizzard would look at a concept like Mythic Affixes and think it actually makes the game more enjoyable. Nobody likes this garbage. It makes running a Mythic Plus unfair and punishing and overly difficult. This week is a great example of how affixes are nothing but player-based deteriorating content. Tyrannical is an absolute joke. I can't even fathom how they could look at this and be like, yep, that's fair. If your IO is less than 2k or you don't spend all day and night doing dungeons, forget about timing any keys. This week, it's literally ruining the dungeon experience. Just give us regular dungeons where the boss and mobs difficulties goes up. Everyone was so laid back and actually enjoyed running Mythic Plus dungeons. Now the majority of people are on a tilt. Almost everyone has a horrible negative attitude. One wrong fart and you'd be spammed by KYS and racial slurs. How have they not realized the decline yet? For the past 3 expansions in a row, they've rolled with this garbage, not realizing it could be one of the many factors just pushing people away from this game. It's amazing how ignorant they are. Okay. Where do we start with this one? So, Blizzard, yeah, okay, alright. Blizzard are definitely ignorant in some stuff. It could be fun to have Mythic Plus just being basic with no affixes. However, the argument here from my perspective is the long-time player longevity of this. People won't want to do it. It's too boring. If there is no change to Mythic Plus, once people have got to, say, plus 20s, they won't want to do it anymore. There won't be any point to them doing it anymore. They've completed the game, so to speak. But when it changes week to week, that means that the game is constantly changing, and you can never say, oh, I've completed Mythic Plus. There's always something new to do. There's always a new challenge. There's always a difficult thing to complete. I think that affixes are a great addition to the game to make Mythic Plus more enjoyable and interesting. It is really tilting and does make you rage a lot when you come across a really annoying affix, like, you know, vortexes. The vortexes can be so annoying as a caster. I just want to cast a spell, man. Just let me cast a spell. You know, that type of stuff. Sanguine can be frustrating as well. They all have their own frustrating little flaws to them, which makes Mythic Plus more interesting. And I appreciate the difficulty because affixes definitely make the game more enjoyable long term. I definitely would fall out of love with Mythic Plus if it was just the same thing every time I went in. I just wouldn't enjoy that. But let's look at the replies. Someone says, I like it. Some would say it's the only difficulty. Sure, key levels are a thing, but a static, unchanging fixture. It's no different than raiding, which is dull after the very first kill. Gotta agree with this. After the first kill, raiding does become boring. And you feel like you've completed the game. So affixes keeps that feeling that you haven't completed the game. You actually are constantly pushing and developing in that. Someone here called Haterade says, Effectively, in his message, I do believe affixes should have more room to play around, and more kiss/curse could be added, but nonetheless, I think keys would be very stale without affixes that challenge you to complete them differently. The issue lies around balancing and affix combinations, in my own opinion. I would actually happen to agree with that. I couldn't read the rest of his message just purely and simply because the English was so terrible that even I couldn't figure out what he was saying. But generally, I do agree with his message. On a whole, affixes makes the game less stale and more interesting to play on repeat. So I definitely appreciate having affixes in the game, though the balancing is the problem when it comes to this. They could definitely improve on that balancing. And on a whole, I think that would be a lot better for them to do. Someone replies, I thoroughly enjoy Mythic Plus. Me too. I have a blast in Mythic Plus. It's annoying when you're playing with randoms and, you know, you've got someone who just doesn't understand an affix. That is frustrating. But, I mean, that's part of the game. You're always going to find people that are frustrating who don't really know what they're doing. Some of the sarcastic responses are, so you're having a little trouble with explosives, huh? I love these forums, man. The forums get me so, like, so joyful because just when you think that everyone's starting to agree on some stuff and everyone's starting to be, like, on the same page, you get some people that are just there with a big wooden spoon and they're giving that pot a good stir. They're like, oh, chaos grenade. You know, it just makes things worse. And this person here, so you're having a little trouble with explosives, huh? You're not good enough, huh? He says, honestly, his response is, honestly, explosives isn't that bad and sanguine is manageable with good tanks. It's tyrannical that is just an absolute horror show. People are saying just do mechanics and use personal cooldowns. Problem is most pugs can't. Yeah, I got to agree. Pugs, it's always the problem with pugs. People who play it alone often don't get taught by their friends or their peers how to play the game at that level, and so end up just having really bad habits. That's why those people who have pugged all the content in the expansion, when they do eventually join a guild, they often don't get on very well with the guildies because they're so used to doing the bad habits that they were doing whilst they were pugging, that when the guildies are like, can you do this instead? They often rebel against them. They're like, no, I never did that before, so why would I do it now? You know, they're just not used to playing at that level. Some people are saying get rid of Fortified and Tyrannical. It could be interesting to get rid of Fortified and Tyrannical. It doesn't feel very fun. As a World of Warcraft Mythic Plus player myself, I don't enjoy either Fortified or Tyrannical. I think both are completely just unenjoyable. And I think there could be much better affixes out there that could replace them that actually like were fun to play around with rather than just more health, more damage type thing. So on a whole, this post doesn't say just get rid of all affixes. It's just particularly certain affixes that are boring and not as enjoyable or don't really add anything to the game other than more health, more damage. This person here, Grendel, is saying what I'm saying is, this person here, Grendel, is saying you don't actually have to be pushing 20s plus 20s. Feel like you're accomplished anything in World of Warcraft. There is such a thing as being happy with wherever your sweet spot is. If your personal skill and dedication places you in, say, plus 15s, then be happy. That is by no means a bad accomplishment. I actually have something to add to this. Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with this. Not everyone is capable of pushing plus 20. And they shouldn't feel like they have to. You know, the game is so enjoyable. Play at multiple levels. You don't have to, you know, make the game hard of yourself. Enjoy World of Warcraft for the game it is. And not everyone has to play at the highest difficulty possible. There is definitely honor in playing at the level that you're comfortable with. And hey, as the time goes on, you develop more of your skills in game, you might find that your minimum level goes up and up and up, and eventually you might even be a plus 20 player. That might become your new level to play at. For me personally, I really like playing at about plus 17 to plus 19-ish level. That's kind of where I feel comfortable right now, but I am trying to push that up to plus 20. His response is, if that's how you think, I feel the best scenario for you would just be not play the game instead of trying to cope with some false sense of accomplishment which you perceive as acceptable, but in comparison, literally anything else is inferior. This is a really toxic, elitist mentality to have. On a whole and completely undermines your whole post. Not everyone wants to go for the top numbers in the game. Not everyone can be the best player in World of Warcraft. We can all strive for more, which is completely fine, but definitely play the game where you enjoy it most. And if you don't enjoy it, don't play it at that level. Just play at the level that you're comfortable and you enjoy for. But I do always encourage people to push it that much further, a little bit further at a time. Just don't go too far out of your comfort zone, because you could just get a really bad experience that completely puts you off the game on a whole. So I definitely wouldn't criticize people for wanting to play at the level they're comfortable with. And I definitely wouldn't say don't play the game because you want to do that. That's just a stupid mentality. And Artazar, the way you've commented that is really stupid, quite elitist. I don't like that. Someone says here, I would love to see Mythic Plus without timers or affixes. So it's really not Mythic Plus then, right? Because if you have no timer and you have no affixes, it's just a dungeon. I guess it would be a harder level dungeon and you could take all the time you want in the world, but I guess not everyone has that time. I think that would be a terrible idea personally, but it's whether it works for you, right? You might have a lot of time to play through Mythic Plus. I have said this in the past, I wish that Blizzard would release solo versions of dungeons that people can push by themselves, just to kind of practice the game more, so get used to the mechanics. You know, it could be quite a fun addition to it. Someone replies, petition denied. I love this. So this started so well that Artazar has really just like ruined his entire post with his toxic negative attitude. Like, I'm just gonna read this. Someone says they like the affixes and they like rest of like how Mythic Plus are right now, and he's like, why lie to yourself like that other delusional clown up there, Grendel, who's okay with doing Mythic Zeros and calling it a day, then feeling accomplished afterwards. What a joke. So first of all, Grendel did say if 20s is where you're happy with, and stick to 20s. If plus 15s is happy with, stick to plus 15s. Do what makes you feel okay. But he's taken that to the extreme and said Mythic Zeros. So obviously he's, I don't know if he's being unpurposely unintelligent, but it's definitely not clever to take someone's idea and then run it to the absolute extreme and then criticize them and call them a clown as a result. That's just not cool, bro. You could do a lot better than that, and it completely undermines your authenticity of this post. You just make yourself look like an idiot. And believe it or not, I think you had a great point until you started to be rude and nasty to other people who just disagree with you on this post. Everyone's got an opinion, and you should try and be respectful of each other's opinion without being critical or without being overly critical and nasty about your difference of opinion. I'm not going to read the rest of his comment because I think he's just a really toxic person on a whole, and I just don't want to. Sozeri says in response to his comment about 90% of the posts on forums are about the hate towards Mythic Plus. Their response is, which means absolutely nothing. Guess what? The majority of forum posters use the forums for to complain. 100% agree with that. They definitely use the forums to complain. It's quite funny actually reading through some of the complaints because some of them have good points, but the way they make the points is just hilarious because it's so ridiculous, and they're so aggressive and horrible to people who disagree with them in some way, shape, or form. You are cherry-picking antidotes from the forums as some sort of usable data. I do have to agree that is 100% what he's doing. And his response is, cope harder. I read the last part of my comment too. Overzealous defender of all things Blizzard. Absolute joke. His response to that is cope harder. It's clear I'm not the one who needs to cope. You know, since I actually enjoy the game. Oh, damn. There's some sassiness going on here. Someone replies with another whiner that only does LFR and sub plus 15 keys, complaining about how hard Mythic Plus is, how original. How about just get better? It's the end game content. Not everyone should be able to do plus 20 keys. If it's too hard for you, it's too hard for you. Either get better, stay stagnant, or do something else. Your choice. I mean, he's kind of brutal with how he says it, but he's not wrong. He's not wrong. Not everyone can do plus 20 keys, and not everyone is the best player in the world. So if you can't do it, just don't do it. Do something else instead. I do like complainers though, because sometimes complainers do lead to positive change in the game. So I do have to say, sometimes it is good to complain. I do hate the comments of just get better. They're just very frustrating to read on a whole. It's not really constructive, is it? Most affixes aren't very interesting, honestly. They do break up the monotony of doing the same dungeon throughout the season. However, I don't think they need to go away. Perhaps change the more annoying one. See, I don't mind the annoying ones. I just mind the ones that are boring. I don't like a boring affixes. Boring affixes bring nothing to the game and should be replaced with enjoyable affixes that actually make us enjoy the dungeon. I think that's the problem. Without affixes, ideal routes would be identified for each key and it would be the same each week, which would get stale fast. Agreed. Let's just look at raids. Whenever someone finds a quicker route through a raid, or a little glitch, or a little trick that you can do to complete a boss a little bit quicker, that becomes the normal and raid becomes absolutely boring from that day on. Yes, some affixes are a lot more impactful than others, and Blizzard's affix combination this expansion have been terrible: grievous / bursting, raging / fortified, but they do add flavor to keys as you pull them differently. I do believe affixes should have more room to play around, and more kiss / curse could be added. Angelique says, the design of the season is great. Not everyone is capable of killing mythic raid bosses. Sure, they can use the I don't have time, I have a family excuses all they want, but 10 times out of 10, it's a skill issue, and that is perfectly okay. Not everyone is above average, and I fall into that demographic happily. Previously, if you couldn't kill a mythic raid boss, that was fine because you could just brute force a +15 key and be done with it. Now, if you want to raid mythic level loot, you're back to having to be able to do mythic raid. Now, if you want mythic raid level loot, you're back to having to be able to do mythic raid level of work. Well, it's getting closer. Not everyone should have the best gear available. It should be status symbol to be that geared. People considered the olden days of WoW to be the best, and back then, those philosophies applied. Glad we're back to it, even if I'm left out. Angelique, I think you've got a great point here, and I think that if you put the time and effort into the game to being that skilled, then you should have the better rewards that other people don't. On a whole, there's a lot of really good points here in this forum. I think there are some things we've kind of got to grips here with the fact that Mythic Plus could be improved. There could definitely be some improvements made there on a whole, and generally we could really improve Mythic Plus if Blizzard just got rid of some of the more boring affixes and replace them with more enjoyable affixes. Maybe even poll them and put them out to the general WoW player base and say, hey, what do you want to see in a Mythic Plus? Would you prefer this affix, or this affix? And then leave the player choice, and leave the choice to actual players, or maybe even you poll it to people who have completed +15s this season and see what they think on a whole, as they are the players who are dealing with it the most, right? You can do whatever you think is right, but on a whole, if you put the ownership on the players, they can't really complain about it that much. But they obviously will, but not that much, hopefully. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, make sure you smash that like button and you click subscribe. And if you want to get a dragon t-shirt, check the link in the description. Thanks for watching. This is Erosium.